Hi there. This is Stacey Sanderson, and it's been a while since I've put anything up on YouTube. I have been in Spain for I think 10 days, and prior to that, just really busy preparing for that trip where I was playing rugby as part of a mixed ability team representing Canada, and that was an experience, and so there will be some aspects of that experience shared as I get back into the fold of creating content. But one of the things that comes up for me often as a psychotherapist, as I'm working with clients, and particularly in narcissistic recovery, is the question of why are narcissists so antagonistic? Just aware that my hair is looking wonky. There we go. Um, and they are, right? They're very antagonistic. And I think some of that is intentional and some of it isn't. It's not conscious. But there tends to be some fairly common contexts for when narcissists are antagonistic. And the one I hear the most is with daughters of narcissistic mothers, right? Particularly um, uh, seeking conflict or wanting to set someone off balance, right? I think the other place you might see this more generally is when someone is being oppositional or making an argument for the sake of having an argument. I think that's another example of that. But basically, antagonism refers to the act of keeping someone off balance or the act of upsetting someone, right? We think of an antagonist as being something that takes an element from one stage to another. So if you are going about your life and you are perfectly happy and joyful and content, to me, that's the number one reason why a narcissist is going to be antagonistic is to throw you off that balance, knock you out of your seat of joy. The other reason why this happens, so this is reason number two, is because as we've talked about before, narcissists are generally emotionally dysregulated. They, go about seeking that regulation by keeping their self-esteem and ego needs validated. So they're always a little bit off kilter, or they're hyper vigilant about what you say or what you do. So or what anyone says or does, they're super sensitive to criticism. So their baseline level of dysregulation is part of this antagonism. Reason number three is if you don't meet their need for validation, right? So if you're maybe ignoring them or disagreeing or being critical, so jumping off of what I just said, that's another reason, right? They will see you as an adversary. They will place you in an adversarial role without you even knowing it, and then become antagonistic. Reason number four is it helps them feel powerful, right? Especially if there are those kind of bully layers. So they will be antagonistic because it helps them to feel powerful, again, maintaining that ego equilibrium. And I think that reason number five is because they're so driven by a position of superiority or feeling like they've won something. So that underlying grandiosity is another reason why they can be very antagonistic, right? That need to feel like they're on top, that need to feel like they're winning, that need to feel like they have a superior position socially is a number of reasons. So I've listed, broadly 5 reasons, and then I'm going to just break that down into how that might happen. And I think the most common thing they do is, this is what I hear about quite often, is they will ask you a question they already know the answer to. And if you don't answer accordingly to what they know the answer to be, they will call you out on it. Number one, I bet many of us have had this experience at work. Number two, they will say different things to different people. So they will give one viewpoint or opinion to one person and a very different opinion to someone else. And number three is if they know that you have a particular viewpoint about something that you might feel strongly about, they may they may challenge that in some way, or they may say that they talked to someone else and someone else had a different opinion about this. I've seen this in the therapy space where narcissists will often say, well, another therapist said this, or I read this book that had this quote, or I watched this YouTube channel that had this to say about it. So there's an element of argumentativeness, but not for the sake of healthy debate, but rather to feel like they're in the superior position in the conversation. Um, all of it, of course, is about keeping you off balance and maintaining their ego equilibrium. So I refer to this as well as poking or as sniping. And if you've lived with a narcissist for a long period of time, so this might be a partner, a sibling, parent, they have over time created an environment of intermittent reinforcement where they know where your soft points are. They know where your vulnerabilities are. So if you have shared with them that there is something that is bothersome to you, they're going to do or say that very thing. So I've said for a long time now that our narcissistic parents know what buttons to push because they're the ones who created them. Right. And they also like to set up competition between people for their love and affection. And that's another way they can be antagonistic, is creating these competitive dynamics within the people in their families or social circles. Um, then, above and beyond all of that, I think that narcissists can be antagonistic for pure attention seeking reasons, right? For purely staying in that spotlight, right? For bringing the attention back to them. And then there's an aspect here as well of a lack of emotional maturity and self-regulation skill to be able to simply meet you where you're at in any kind of exchange. They just lack the capacity to be able to do that. They're not always antagonistic right off the hop. They can reel you in a fairly normal level of conversation and then be very subtly antagonistic. So, this can be something that is more overt or more covert, right? They can undermine you without even speaking with you, in conversations with other people, for example, right? So, there's also an aspect, if this is resonating with you because you're the son or daughter of a narcissistic mother, particularly, there is an element here of the mother wound, of powerlessness, of reclaiming a sense of power and agency by taking that away from you, right? By being a bit more sneaky or insidious about it, right? And I've said for a long time that they like to argue because it makes them feel powerful, right? I read a quote today that, most people seek connection, but narcissists seek to feel superior. And that's a really fundamental difference because it's confusing if you're in a relationship with them and they're being so difficult. So, if someone is being antagonistic toward you, I think the key thing is to take a step back, literally, right? And then take a step back metaphorically and observe and label the behavior, right? You've got to center this into your own experience first. And from there, be careful not to get pulled into the dysregulation and be careful not to get pulled into that negative energy. Maintain your own equilibrium here. Then you can withdraw from the conversation. You can change the subject. Don't take the bait, right? Narcissists are brilliant at baiting you so that they can get a reaction and then describe that to other people or use it against you. So don't take that bait. And you can say something like, I don't like the way this conversation is going, or I would like to just take some space right now, which is something that I did recently with someone who's pretty toxic. Um, but what you want to do is step out of the exchange that's becoming very negative. And in the moment, I think you'll have a fairly clear idea of how to do that. So there are many reasons, of course, why narcissists are so antagonistic. I'd love to hear what you think about this. Like, subscribe, drop a note in the comments if you've had this experience. I do indeed want to hear about it, and we'll keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for dropping in and listening, and I wish you a good day or a good evening.